So today is going to be my ColourPop Super Shock Shadow collection video. I also wanted to include two things that I thought you guys might find helpful. One is how I store these shadows. So I had kind of adopted this from a couple different Pinterest images that I had seen, and it's working out really well for me. So I wanted to show you how I am storing these. And then secondly, I wanted to show you how I recover Super Shock shadows that have maybe dried out. If you're not familiar with this texture, it is definitely a cream bouncy formula, and what I've noticed is that sometimes they can dry out even when I have the cap secured tightly on. So both of those things at the end of my video. If you're interested in either how I store my ColourPop shadows or in how you might save a shadow that has dried out on you, I will leave timestamps for that down below so you can fast forward to the end of the video and look at those. If you guys are just here for swatches and the collection, you are in the right place. We're going to go ahead and lay all these out and get started. I just want to talk to you guys about the different formulas that ColourPop has, because currently on their website they have 6 different formulas listed, and then there are 2 ones that have since been retired. They may choose to bring them back, they may not at some point, but I did want to touch on these 2 formulas. The way they've got it organized is they have matte formulas, satin, pearlized, metallic, ultra metallic, and ultra glitter. These 2 in the back here are a sheer opal and a tie-dye. So if you're gonna look at the formulas, I've kind of laid them out here. So the matte formula is obviously matte. I actually think this is an underrated formula from them. The satin texture gives a little bit of sheen to the skin, but not a ton. You could easily use their satins as a matte shadow as you're building a look. Their pearlized shadows tend not to have any glitter to them, but have a little bit more shine to them than their satins. Their metallic formula, on the other hand, seems to have a decent amount of glitter in all of them, but it has a pretty strong base color to it as well. The formulas that they're probably the most famous for are their ultra metallics. This is the shade La La here on my arm, and it is full on intense metallic color. Then they do something called an ultra glitter. Unlike the matte shadows that have a decent base to them, this has a lot lighter of a base and a lot more glitter. So those are the 6 formulas that you're going to see on their website more commonly. This is the sheer opal shade. It is sheer. It really is meant more as a topper. This is the shade Summer Lovin', which came out last summer and obviously has some glitter in it. It was more tie-dyed till I smushed my finger in it. As far as application with these all work well with your fingers, but I know not everyone likes to use their fingers, so I would say you have kind of 2 options to apply. One, go get a flat shader brush for any of these. So synthetic flat shader brush. The Wet n Wild 99-cent one that they have for concealer is a great option. The other option that actually works really well that I don't think a lot of people talk about is actually a foam sponge. So like those little cheapy foam applicators that you can buy in multiple packs, those work really well to pick up these shadows and lay them down on your eyes smoothly. So if you're not comfortable using your fingers or you just don't like to use your fingers, I would recommend one of those 2 application methods. I've also found that a more dense crease brush, like the one from It Cosmetics, I'll put it here up on the screen and then I'll link it down below, work really well to pick up a matte shadow like this and blend it out into your crease and into the corners of your eyes. You can really use these like you would any other matte shadow with a denser synthetic blending brush. And the thing that I like about all of these is that they never crease on me. I can put these on and wear them for a 12-hour day and they look every bit as nice and metallic or pearl or matte as they were when I put them on. So unlike some matte shadows that can fade on me or some glitters that have a tendency to have fallout, none of these do. You blend them out, they lock down, and they really are a unique formula, and there's a reason that people are as obsessed with them as you've seen on YouTube lately. So here's how we're going to approach this. We are going to go through my collection kind by kind. We're going to go mattes to satins to pearls, etc. And then I'm going to go through at the very end and kind of swatch some shades that I would consider to be similar. There are some shades on their website, especially in this sort of rose gold / copper spectrum, that look really, really stinking similar. So I want to swatch things that look incredibly similar so that if you're thinking about picking up one of these, you can have a better sense of how these shadows look side by side and maybe pick which one appeals to you more. Here are the 7 matte shades that I own. I'm going to go through and swatch these one by one. I don't know off the top of my head how many of these are discontinued. If they are discontinued, I will certainly tell you that on the screen here. But ColourPop has this really bad habit of launching really unique shades and then discontinuing them in favor of other new things. They do this all the time, and then sometimes they bring them back, and then sometimes they're just permanently gone. We're going to run across shades throughout this entire video that are a little dried out and need to be recovered using that method we're going to talk about here at the end of the video. So if I struggle to swatch any of these, or they're dried out but it looks like a shade that I will probably use, I'm going to set those to the side and then try and recover them. First shade up is the shade Bill, and I wanted to mention that because this one in particular seems to be pretty dried out to me. In fact, I think I'm going to have a hard time getting any sort of swatch from it. Yeah, see, it's definitely dried out. So let's just see what we can do here. Yeah, but it's like a purpley grayish color that I just thought would be super flattering on me. So I do love this shade, and so this is one I'm going to set aside to recover. The next shade is the shade As If, and I think this one also needs some recovery. This was part of their 90210 collection. This one I do know isn't available anymore, but it was a color I did use the heck out of for a while there. This is the shade Hanky Panky, and this is just a really nice neutral brown color. This is the shade Cornelius. That one looks like it also needs to be recovered. This was a collaboration between Kathleen Lights and ColourPop. This is the shade Brady. That one is newer to my collection, and you can just see it swatches really beautifully because it isn't dried out at all. So love Brady. It's really pinky toned and beautiful. This is the shade Flutes, which is a really sort of interesting yellowy khaki color. This is a shade I like in my crease, but I also like this all over my lid, and then I will pat some of those ultra glitters over the top. Makes a really pretty combo. And then finally, this is the shade Bravery. It's just a really nice chocolatey brown color. Not too warm, not too cool. So once again, there are all of my matte Super Shock shadows. So here are all 5 of my satin formulas. They don't do a ton in this formula. Up first is the shade Truth. This is just a really pretty light sort of champagne color with a little bit of like khaki depth to it. This is just a beautiful all over lid shade. This is the shade Strength, and I believe this one is discontinued, which sucks because it is lovely. It's kind of like Truth, but just a little bit deeper. It's just a beautiful sort of golden khaki color. Next is shade Waddles. If you follow my Project Pran, you've seen this swatched already. This is just a really pretty sort of salmony, mauvey, pink color. I love this color. It's absolutely stunning. It's one of my favorite just single shadow looks. And then I also love this one in my crease. This one is new to my collection. I've not played around with it a ton. This is the shade Cheeky, and it's a bright, bright coral. And then this is probably one of my favorite shades that they ever did. And of course they've discontinued it. This is 90210. This is actually, they call it a Satin Lux. So they took this satin formula and added an ever so slight micro shimmer to it. And what makes this color so cool to me is that they actually took a cool toned brown and ran an ever so tiny gold micro shimmer through it. If I were going to recommend any from here, I definitely think Waddles and Truth, I believe, are both still available and are gorgeous shades. So next up are Pearlized shades. I've got 5 of them, and I did want to call it one thing about this formula in particular. This is the only formula that I have had issues with it kind of crumbling out of the pan. In fact, this is a pretty new shade to my collection, and it actually arrived kind of in pieces with crack. Now you're able to press these back down, but they have a tendency to pop back out again even after pressing them down. So something about this Pearlized formula is just a little less bound together and a little more prone to cracking. Doesn't mean I don't like it, but I just wanted to call that out because I have had that happen on several shades. Up first is the shade Supermodel, which is a really pretty gold, light champagne gold color. I think, like I mentioned before, none of these have glitter in them. This is the shade Weenie. This was put out by Kathleen Lights. And this is a shade that, even though they're calling it pearlized, it actually is a lot more shiny than some of these other shades and reminds me a lot more of the ultra metallic. Next up, this is the shade White Rabbit. It's a really pretty copper color with a lot of red orange in it. Very intense shade. Really makes a lot of different eye colors pop. This is the shade Boy Band. And as you can see, it's just a much darker copper color. And then finally, the shade Partridge. Really pretty green that has a light, maybe brown duochrome shift to it, but it's a really, really stunning color. I love this all over my eyes. So there are the 5 shades swatched. So next up, these are my metallic shadows. Up first is the shade Lovely, which is a really bright, pretty champagne gold. It's really brightening on the eyes, incredibly metallic. Next up is the shade Birthday Boy. I think this was limited edition for ColourPop's birthday. It has sort of a, I would say, light sort of tan base with a ton of purple and silver and gold glitter in it. But although I don't believe this one is available anymore, the next shade is. This is So Quiche. This is a shade that I believe they're now carrying at Ulta. It's definitely one of their more popular shades. This has a darker sort of brownish base to it, but it has very similar pinky gold glitter in it, the same way that this one does. Next up is the shade 3. This one is one of those ones that really goes on a little differently on your eyes than it looks in the pan. It looks like it's kind of a cool toned base in there, but it has a warmer base, brown base to it. It has really pretty purple, green, and maybe silver glitter in it, so I think it's the glitter that's giving it that coolness in the pan. Next up is the shade Porter. This is another one of the shades that Kathleen Lights did with ColourPop. This is a beautiful burgundy color that has a tiny, tiny gold reflect in it. Next up is the shade Bay. This is one of those ones that's almost like a tricolor. It shifts from green to blue to purple, depending on how the light hits it. If you like more bold colors like this is a really unique color, and nothing else in my collection even comes close to it, powdered or cream. Next up is the shade Midnight. So it's sort of one of those darker olive green gold with a strong gold shimmer in it. And then last up is a shade Thirsty Girl. This is a bronze slash deeper gold shade. I think this is a shade that they keep bringing out and discontinuing and bringing back because everyone's obsessed with it. And they're obsessed with it for a good reason. This one is super creamy because it's newer to my collection. So here are all of the shades close up. Next is the Ultra Metallic line. This is probably the formula that ColourPop is the most well known for, and I think for good reason, because these are like so uber foiled. Okay, up first is the shade Get Lucky. And this is a really pretty gold. I like that it's a neutral gold, and what I mean by that, it's not too cool toned and dirty looking, leaning silver, but it's also not as yellow leaning as a lot of golds. I think this is just a really pretty, like I said, neutral gold, stunning shade. And this is the saddest shade that I wish they would bring back. If I had to pick one shade from ColourPop that I was most obsessed with, it would be this, and they freaking have discontinued it. Now, they did bring it back one time at Christmas, so I'm kind of hoping that if enough people request it, or maybe they'll just continue to bring it back at the holidays. Not sure, but this is Couche. And as you can see, it's like a cool tone shade, but it definitely has a slight pinky undertone to it. It is one of those colors that you put on your lids and it just brightens up your lid, and it just pairs so well with so many things. I will continue to look for a dupe for you guys, and you will be the first to know if I find anything, because clearly I'm obsessed. This is one of their newer shades. This is the shade Sundance. And I would definitely say this fits in that rose gold family, but it definitely has a lot more peach to it. Next up, this is the shade Lala. This is a shade they are definitely known for. It is a stunning rose gold, but it's got some nice warmth to it as well, so it's not quite as rosy as some other rose golds in my collection. This is the shade Game Face. This is another one of their sort of coppery shades. So that is Game Face, just a really, really bright copper. And then if you're a fan of really pretty foiled silvers, this is probably one of the best ones out there. I think it's absolutely stunning. This is a great shade. This is the shade Liberty. I don't think I said that. Super metallic, as you can see there, highly reflective. This is the shade Telepathy. This is another shade that Kathleen Lights did with them. This is the most amazing chartreuse limey green, and you wouldn't think this would be that wearable, but I really love it. I think it actually works on your lid in a ton of different ways. Really cool green color. And then this is the shade Issa. This is one of their newer shades for, I believe, spring this year. It is a really, really pretty purple shade that has a nice metallic foil shift to it. It's definitely a duochrome purple blue shade. Here are some close-ups of all of my ultra metallic shades. Last section, these are all of the ultra glitters. This is definitely a formula that tends to have a lighter base and a lot more glitter as a ratio. First up, this is the shade Sailor. This is a really interesting color because it's kind of a, I would say, a tri-color shift to it. So it has a teal, it has a silver, and it also has a purple glitter in here. Depending on how the light hits it, you really see all of those tones. This is one of those shades that I definitely like to put over a base. So let me show you what I mean. Just gonna lay down a base of Wattles here and put it over the top. And now you can definitely see that glitter come through a lot more strongly. Next up is the shade Prickly Pear. And this has a really pretty lavender base with a gold shift to it. This is one that you can see definitely has a little bit more of a base and is not quite as sheer as Sailor. Next up is the shade Frog. This is, I know, one of their newer shades. This is a really cool color. It has a light pink base and then a ton of pink glitter and teal, like light aqua glitter, and then also some silver in there. This is the shade Party of 5. This was one I know they launched for their 5-year birthday. It has a really pretty warm sort of salmon undertone to it as its base, and then has gold and teal glitter in it. Beautiful color. Next up, this is technically a tie-dye, but I felt like this formula was closest to these ultra glitters, so I put it in here. This came out last summer. This is the shade Summer Lovin'. And this is a really pretty rose gold glitter. Next up is another shade that came out for spring. This is the color Sidekick. It's a really, really bright sort of orangey copper, yellowy sunset. I don't know. It's a really cool color. I don't own anything like this in my collection. I don't even think I own anything in eyeshadow palettes this color. This is the shade DGAF. It came out, I believe, at holiday. It has a ton of gold glitter in it, but also has a little bit of a duochrome green shift to it. Next up is the shade Farside. It has a cooler toned brown base to it with a gold and a silver shimmer in it. Next up is the shade Whittle. It is an intensely purple shade with a blue glitter in it. So this is going to give you that duochrome blue purple shift to it. Next up is the shade Special Delivery. This isn't a color I wear a ton. As you can see, it actually is a little bit sheerer, and I think as a result, this is going to be a really wearable aqua color for me. It has a ton of silver and gold shimmer in it. And then last but not least, this is that sheer opal formula that the Coffee Brink with Danny put out. It's a really cool color. It kind of looks like a peacock in there, but it is very sheer. To be honest, I kind of wish it showed up like it looks in the pan, that sort of really pretty peacock color. Definitely can't fit them all here on the camera, so just kind of zooming around here to kind of give you an effect for all of these. Like I said, I wanted to compare across formulas some colors that look really similar, and if ColourPop loves putting out anything, it is a awesome rose gold shadow. So I did want to swatch these all side by side so that you can see kind of how they differ from one another and maybe decide if there's one you prefer over another. Okay, so from bottom to top, the first is Weenie. This is the rosiest rose gold they have. The next one is Lala, which is a rose gold, but it definitely leans a little bit more coppery than Weenie did. This is Sundance. This is one that's lighter, so it really reminds me a lot of Lala, just slightly lighter and brighter. And then finally, this is one that I don't think is available anymore, but just in case you had it and wanted to see how it compares to other shades, this is the shade Summer Lovin', and it almost looks like they took Weenie and just added a whole bunch of like silver and gold glitter to it. The shade combo that I feel like people have questions about are the golds and kind of how do they swatch next to each other. This first shade is lovely. You can see it's definitely more of a peachy gold, and then the shade Get Lucky, I would say, is probably your truest gold. And then finally it's the shade Thirsty Girl, which has a ton of gold glitter in it, but has sort of a deeper base to it. So you're kind of getting that, what I would consider to be that dirty gold effect. Another set of 3 shades that I know I Googled about because I was trying to understand the difference between the colors are sort of these coppery colors here. So the first one is shade Sidekick. As you can see, this one has a lot more yellow to it, a very strong yellow base to it with those coppery shimmers throughout it. This is the shade Game Face, and I would say this is probably the closest shade you're going to get to sort of that copper penny look. And then finally, this is shade White Rabbit, which definitely has a lot more reddish undertones to it. And then the final color comparison I wanted to make was sort of this muted, plummy, gold, glittery kind of shade. The bottom shade is the shade 3. It's definitely the darkest of all of them, has a very strong brown undertone, even though it looks super plummy in the pan. Next up is So Quiche. This definitely has a dirty gold undertone to it with the pink and purple and gold glitter running through it. This is Birthday Boy. I know this one is discontinued, but I wanted to put it next to So Quiche because I think a lot of people were questioning if this was the same as So Quiche, and I would say it's not. This one has a lot stronger pink glitter to it. And then finally, this is Prickly Pear. This is one of their newer shades. This is definitely closest to that birthday shade, but I would say it's more purple toned with the gold glitter in it. So this technically wasn't a true declutter, and even if it was, I suck at it because I really like this formula. I really like the shades that I have, but I do think there are 3 that I'm going to get rid of. This is the shade Kindness, the one that's super sheer, and I kind of wish it was stronger, that sort of peacocky shade. I'm going to go ahead and declutter this one. This is the shade Strength. I've recovered this once. It's a satin shade, but I don't find myself reaching for this one a ton, so I'm going to go ahead and let this one go. And then finally, this shade Cheeky. It is pretty, but I don't see myself reaching for it a ton, so I'm actually going to pass this one on to a friend. So what you're looking at here, kind of in the background behind these shadows, is actually a metal board. There's a number of different ways I've seen people do this on YouTube. This is what worked the best for me, and I feel like it's pretty sturdy, and I've not had any of my ColourPop shadows fall off. So what I've bought from Lowe's is some magnets, and you can buy these at Lowe's, they're at Home Depot, they're probably on Amazon as well, but they're pretty sturdy magnets. They're a little thicker, if you can see that, and they stick really intensely to this board. What I've gotten a Super Shock shadow is I have peeled the back of the sticker off and set it aside, and then I have put one of these little metal discs on the back. These come with Z palettes, but you can also buy them individually on Amazon and craft stores. They have a sticky adhesive on one side that you can use to then put on the back of the Super Shock shadow. I have actually found that this adhesive has a tendency to fail on me after a period of time, so I actually double down on the adhesive. I will pull this off, and then I actually add a little bit of hot glue to the back of this disc before pressing it on. These stickers would be really hard to pull off, but they're not. So if you peel off the sticker, put a little hot glue on the back of this, press it on, let it cool, and then put the sticker back on top. What you're left with is a sticker on top of the metal disc. You can barely tell that the disc is on there. It's very unobtrusive. It doesn't add a lot of like height to it. It's very easy to travel with. But then with the magnet sticking on the board, this fits right on and drops down. So as you can see here, these are going nowhere, and it's very easy for me to hang these on my wall. If you don't think you're going to travel with them and you're not that concerned about having this super flush against the back, you could, by all means, hot glue this magnet right onto the back of this. But as you can see, it just adds a little bit of bulk that I really wasn't interested in on the back of every single one of my shadows. It also allowed me to kind of figure out how I wanted these positioned on the board before I ever put them on, because essentially what I did was I went and placed a row of all of these metal discs first, and then just snapped the ColourPop shadows into place. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions about how I've explained this, I will try and link all of the materials I've used down below so you can easily find them online. But let me know in the comment section if you need me to clarify anything, or if you want anything in more detail. I'd be happy to maybe do a blog post for you guys with more pictures, etc. But overall, this was not a complicated project. I just think it is a fun way and a more enjoyable way for me to see my collection quickly. I want to show you how to recover an older Super Shock shadow that just is feeling a little bit dried out. So here's what you're going to need: a knife and a spoon and some sort of little bowl. And then also bring some paper towels with you. And then finally, what you're going to want to have with you is some sort of silicone-based primer. I keep this Smashbox Photo Finish primer around specifically for recovering Super Shock shadows. This isn't my favorite formula, but what I would say is go through your collection and look for something that has silicones very high up in the list. In fact, if you can find something like this where there isn't any water and it's just silicone based, all the better. I will do a little research and link cheaper options than this Smashbox one in the description box below, because I'm sure there's things at the drugstore that mimic this. But I also know that this comes up as a sample quite a lot at Ulta and Sephora, so you may have a sample of this running around, or if you get one, just set it aside for use with this. Your first step is definitely your scariest, and that is you're going to scrape out all of this into your dish. We're just gonna set this to the side for the time being. And then you wanna take your knife, or you could use a fork, it might be easier, but I'm just gonna use my knife, and I'm gonna break this up into a lot of little pieces. That's kind of what you're looking for. You want it to be slightly powdery. It just helps the primer that we're about to put in here blend in a little bit easier. We're gonna add a little bit of primer in here slowly. You can see that I just did 2 tiny little squirts in there. Take our knife and just kind of begin to press it together. And I'm gonna need a little bit more, but once again, I just recommend going slowly, adding it together, adding a little bit more, mixing it together, add a little bit more. When it gets to a state that's kind of looking a little bit more putty-like and you're not seeing huge flakes come across like you were before, like basically looking super powdery, when it gets to this sort of putty-like texture and you can press it up against the side of the bowl, that's when you know you're ready to put it back in its original container. So I'm just going to use my knife and kind of scrape this back in. I'm just going to use my finger at this point to spread it around. And then I'm going to take my spoon and I'm going to really press it in here. Clean up the edge here. And at this point, this shadow is really good to use again. Has a nice creamy texture to it. It's not crumbling on me at all. And it's swatching beautifully. Feels just like it did when I first got it. The reason this works is that this is a silicone-based product. It has several different silicones in its first ingredients and no water, if I remember correctly. And this is the same. No water, lots of different kinds of silicones in there. So that is really the trick. Find a primer that doesn't have any water in it, that is just full of dimethicones, and it will really help you recover any of the Super Shock Shadow formulas. That wraps up my Super Shock Shadow collection, plus a couple of extra tips and tricks thrown in. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, enjoyed the swatches. Let me know down below if there are shades that you have that I don't have that you think I should have. I feel like I have a bit of an issue with this formula, but hey, what are you gonna do? This might not have been a ruthless declutter like I have done more recently, but I definitely think that this is a formula that I thoroughly enjoy, reach for all the time, and with these hanging up right next to my vanity, I'm really able easily to grab different shades and plop them on and not forget about them in my collection too. So I hope you guys are having a great day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.